Now, in that context where I completely agree, I mean, at the end is, okay, you're given a certain pool of genes and choices that you didn't make. Who are your parents? Where are you growing up? But at the end, it's the decisions that you make along the run that will determine who you are. Now, knowing that, there are certain ideas like that support some of the deterministic views. For example, the noble savage, right? The noble savage is something that Pinker addresses here, and he actually looks at it as a negative thing because it has justified the creation of socialism. For example, the imagining this amazing paradise where the primitive human was free of an environment that makes him evil or violent, and we have to go back to that noble savage era. And the other is the ghost in the machine, right? You are not in control, but there's like the ghost in the machine. Why would Ayn Rand, how would she approach these two visions?
Well, I think that a lot of what Pinker says in that book, by way of critiquing something like the noble savage view, I think is pretty good. I mean, what the noble savage view is a version of the idea that we all start out without any kind of character, and then civilization pressures us and imprints some kind of wickedness in our heart, and that's why people do bad things. And so, to the extent that he's criticizing that idea, I think he's on good footing, because part of what he's doing there is he's criticizing a kind of environmental determinism.
Yeah.
My problem with him is that he then thinks, well, it's just genetic. Whatever's left over is just genetic. He thinks it's either nature or nurture, and that there's not a third option. That no, sometimes we're the ones who are in charge, and it's neither our environment nor our ancestors.
Right.
And the idea of the ghost in the machine, I mean, really comes back to the issue of free will. It's a little bit wider than that. He calls it sort of, without using the metaphor, it's dualism. But this is the idea that the mind is, in the end, that it's supernatural. That consciousness is supernatural, and particularly free will. So it's putting it on the side of religion, that if you were following natural causes and science, you would have to view a human being as determined. He has no power of choice. He doesn't have selection between alternatives. He can't take different forks in the road. And what free will is a non-causal power, or it's the power to override the causes of science. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, he views it as, well, this is a mystical, religious view. It's a ghost. So a ghost is like a supernatural thing who's in the machine, and he calls it pulling levers and things and that's what free will would have to be. And he thinks, well, there's no ghost in the machine, so there's no free will. But you don't have to think of the mind or consciousness like that, like it's this supernatural thing. So Ayn Rand rejects the idea that the only way to think about cause and effect is it's one antecedent thing leading to something that necessitates something else, and there's just one long chain. Right. That she thinks of cause and effect as you have an entity, a thing like a glass, that can act in a certain way, and if I drop it, I'm not going to do it, but if I drop it, it would shatter.
Right.
And she thinks of cause and effect as simultaneous. It's a glass hitting the ground that shatters because it's a glass. And she thinks for human beings, the power of choice means we as a thing have this power to select between these actions, or we have the action of selecting between these things. And that's a completely causal, natural process. So it's compatible with science. You don't need a ghost to try to explain this, but Pinker thinks you need a ghost.
One way of thinking about this is that it's not the case that free will is the power of some kind of ghostly soul, that the soul can leave the body and come back into you or something like that. In point of fact, it's a power, if what it is the power to choose to think or not, then it's a capacity of your consciousness, which means you've got to have a healthy functioning brain for that capacity to actually even come online in the first place. So you go to sleep or you die, there's no more choices left to be made. And even short of that, there are people who unfortunately get sick or they have some kind of organic brain dysfunction. And at a certain point, you can't hold them responsible for their actions anymore because, I mean, they've in effect become deterministic pawns of whichever brain dysfunction they're suffering from. But Rand's idea is that if you've got a healthy brain, it's working on all throttles, then you can now direct it either way you want.